What if, in a single breath, the world around you shifted without warning? Its hues growing faded, its language strange, its very people unrecognizable. Only for you to stumble back into your own time, left clutching evidence that you had somehow lived another era. In this video, we will step beyond the realm of the possible and into accounts of time slips, those bone-chilling moments when ordinary days fractured into extraordinary journeys through history. From the manicured gardens of Versailles to the deep woods of Ontario, these stories blur the line between science fiction and something far more unsettling. Brace yourself, because once you glimpse the past as these witnesses did, the present may never feel quite real again. Versailles, 1901, the ghostly promenade. In the summer of 1901, two distinguished English academics, Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, ventured to the gardens of Versailles, intent on studying Marie Antoinette's retreat at the Petit Trianon. As they crossed a small bridge near the estate, they noticed details that jarred their scholarly expectations. A woman in antiquated dress, sketching by the path, a man with a stocky frame and wide-brimmed hat, observing them with curious intensity. At first, they attributed these oddities to period costume dramas or wayward tourists. But as they walked deeper, the air grew unnaturally still. The geometry of the garden paths seemed altered, and a hush fell that no summer wind should brave. They found themselves before a large, unadorned gravel courtyard, where they expected fountains and parterres, yet only a simple wall and a low pedestal stood. Something compelled them to retrace their steps. But the bridge had vanished, replaced by unfamiliar hedges. Confusion blossomed until a carriage emerged in the distance, a gilded coach drawn by horses, its coachman wearing a powdered wig. Panicked, they retraced the path once more, and in moments emerged onto the modern grounds where motorcars rattled and tourists milled. Back in London, they discovered the Petit Trianon guidebook made no mention of such a courtyard, nor of a gravel space bereft of ornament. Moberly later sketched the pedestal and surrounding walls, features that, she insisted, belonged to the 18th century, not the Belle Epoque. Their joint book and adventure coined the phrase time slip, describing the sensation of stepping through an invisible veil into 1789. Historians searched archives for the courtyard but found no record. To this day, skeptics blame optical illusion. Believers call it proof that time can ripple under the right conditions. But not all time slips unfold amid royal gardens. Sometimes, they appear in the most unexpected of wildernesses, as a group of campers discovered on the shores of Lake Ontario in 1928. Hay Bay, Ontario, 1928, the vanishing camp. A party of 6 friends set out in August 1928 for a week's canoe trip along Hay Bay, a deep inlet of Lake Ontario, fringed by pine and birch. On their third day, they made camp on a small rocky island. Fires were lit, meals shared, and, as darkness fell, the sky filled with stars undimmed by city lights. At dawn, the group awoke to find their campsite eerily transformed. Their tents lay collapsed, poles splintered. The fire pit was cold, blanketed in fresh pine needles, as if weeks had passed in a single night. Even their canoes had vanished. They searched the shoreline but found no footprints, no drag marks, no signs of struggle, only silence. Several hours passed before a passing fisherman spotted them, dazed and disoriented, standing ankle-deep in moss. He ferried them back to civilization, where they reported that the night seemed to stretch endlessly before they awoke. Yet only a few hours had passed. Compasses spun in circles, unable to find true north, and the watches found on their wrists had stopped at midnight. When local authorities examined the island, they found no trace of recent human activity. No food scraps, no footprints, no sign the fire had ever burned. The ribs of the broken tents suggested violent upheaval, not slow decay. Eyewitnesses recalled the friends describing an unearthly hush that blanketed the island, as though sound itself had been swallowed. Some speculated the party had drifted down the shore under the cover of darkness, losing their gear to thieves. Others whispered that they had slipped into a temporal eddy, a pocket of distorted time that flung them backwards or sideways in history. Regardless of the cause, the island remains abandoned to this day, the broken tent fragments bleached by sun and wind, and campers who try to land there report compass failures and an overwhelming sense of déjà vu that chills the marrow. From the isolation of wilderness to the bustle of the city, time slips have even invaded urban landscapes, shifting the familiar into the uncanny. Next, we travel to London's Hammersmith Bridge in 1953, where a bicycle ride became a journey decades into the past. Fulham, England, 1953, the cyclist's lost hour. On an ordinary April morning in 1953, a telephone engineer named William Ashton set out on his bicycle to inspect a junction box near Hammersmith Bridge. As he pedaled along the pavement, traffic clattered, tram bells rang, and storekeepers swept their sidewalks. Yet, at one point, Ashton looked up to find the familiar iron lattice of Hammersmith replaced by a squat, stone-arched span he'd only ever seen in century-old postcards. Disoriented, Ashton dismounted and shielded his eyes. The road surface had changed to cobblestones, and words on the shop fronts were spelt in early 20th century typefaces. A nearby police constable tipped his helmet at Ashton, yet his uniform featured brass buttons and a helmet with an antiquated design. Before Ashton could speak, the constable turned and led a horse through a narrow lane that, in the future, would be a series of modern storefronts. Ashton ran after him, but the street ended at an open field where cows grazed and a young girl in a pinafore chased butterflies. He felt a sudden jolt, as though he'd crossed an invisible boundary, and, blinking, found himself back on Hammersmith Bridge as it appeared in 1953. A motorcar honked, and Ashton yanked his bicycle aside. Heart hammering, he checked his wristwatch. Exactly 1 hour had elapsed. Shaky, he continued to the junction box, uncertain whether he had cycled forward in time or backwards. In later interviews, colleagues noted that Ashton's hands were caked with mud typical of rural paths, not the grime of an urban cycle lane. His trousers bore grass stains, and for days afterwards, he found flecks of dirt beneath his fingernails. London police records showed no reports of missing horses or Edwardian uniforms that morning. Whether Ashton stumbled into 1910 or into a shared hallucination remains a mystery, one that still fascinates urban explorers pedaling across Hammersmith Bridge, wary of the hour they might lose. Beyond individual experiences, sometimes entire communities glimpse a past that never was. Our next tale brings us to a rural English village, Wellingborough, England, 1972, the unmapped road. One summer day in 1972, 5 friends from Wellingborough set out for a drive along a little-used country road that wound through Northamptonshire's rolling fields. Their intention was simple: to picnic beside a river bend unseen by most locals. They drove until the pavement ended, then parked and carried supplies along a dirt track flanked by hedgerows. After lunch, they decided to explore further, only to discover a narrow lane lined with signs warning no through road. Yet pebbles underfoot lay sown with fresh tarmac, an odd combination. They followed it around a bend, expecting a dead end, but emerged onto a bustling high street lined with Tudor-style timber houses, half-timbered inns and horse troughs at the curb. Women in bonneted hats greeted them in archaic dialect, and barley carts rumbled past, yet no tobacco smoke or engine hum disturbed the air. Bewildered, the group turned back, but the road behind seemed impossibly longer, stretching into a dense wood instead of the hedgerow they had left. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the afternoon sun hung low. At that moment, one friend tripped over a root and, when helped to her feet, found the picnic basket at her side unchanged. She opened it to find the sandwiches crisp and cool, as though untouched by time. Their watches, carried into the past, all read the same minute they had left the car, while back in Wellingborough, nearly 2 hours had passed. Returning on the familiar 1972 pavement, they found the lane, a narrow, overgrown byway, unmarked on any official map. Locals denied knowledge of a Tudor street ever existing there. Yet, each friend carried a souvenir: a pressed flower from a Tudor-era garden, a browned parchment that turned out to be a handbill for a village fair dated 1603, a splinter of oak bark, its surface etched with carved initials recorded in parish registers centuries before. Skeptics suggested they chanced upon a film set or a heritage reenactment, but no production crews were scheduled. Why do time slips happen? These 4 stories offer a tapestry of mystery that defies scientific explanation. Some physicists propose that time is not a strict river, but rather a shifting network of eddies where, under precise conditions, the flow can loop back upon itself. Quantum theories of multiple universes suggest that a lapse in our perceptual field might momentarily align with a parallel timeline. Psychologists point to the power of suggestion, group hallucinations, and the brain's vulnerability to pattern seeking in ambiguous environments. Yet these rationalizations struggle to account for the physical evidence: flower specimens, mud tracks, watch stoppages, and shouted greetings in lost dialects. Historians note that each time slip occurred at a boundary between modernity and antiquity, forest and lake, urban and rural, places where memory and landscape intertwine most potently. Could these thresholds act as liminal zones where reality's fabric thins and past and present bleed into each other? Whatever the truth, these accounts remind us that time may be far stranger than we dare imagine. To glimpse another era, even for a heartbeat, is to confront our own mortality and the fragility of the world we call home. When the garden paths of Versailles shift, when an Ontario island abandons its campers, when a London bridge dissolves into cobblestones, or when a country road reveals a bygone village, we are left to wonder, is history a closed book or a living tapestry that still waits for us to turn its hidden pages? So, as you carry on with your day, unaware of the centuries that might swirl just beyond your sight, remember these stories. And the next time you cross a threshold, a garden gate, a forest path, a city bridge, listen for the echoes of another age. Because somewhere, beyond the boundaries of our understanding, time may not be flowing forward at all, but waiting, patiently, for us to slip through.